As Sandra mentioned, my name is Nick Allen, and I'm the Traceability Manager at Patagonia. It may be a brand known to many of you and to some of you not, so I'd like to provide an introduction to who we are, what our values are, and then I want to talk about my role in the organization, which is in traceability. It's a beautiful picture of Patagonia. So our mission statement, this is something that does guide us, and you do hear speakers say this very often, but in Patagonia it is actually true that the mission statement does guide a lot of what we do, and we refer to it very often. And our mission statement is to build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, and inspire use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. We got our start in climbing. This is our founder, Yvon Chouinard, and this is him working in his backyard workshop. And he was one of the first the group of first US mountain climbers at a time when it was mostly something that was focused in Europe. And most of the equipment that was used in mountain climbing was also imported from Europe, and it was pitons made of soft metal. And these pitons had to be, they could only be used a couple of times before being replaced. And so he decided to create something that was made of more hard steel and that could be reused multiple times. So following this work, in 1965, he and his partner Tom Frost founded Chouinard Equipment, and they went about reinventing and redesigning all of the existing mountain climbing equipment, and they had a very strong focus on quality. And for any of you who've ever done any mountain climbing, I'm a novice at this. I just barely started a few months ago. You really realize how very important quality is in climbing equipment, because if you are hanging off the side of a mountain and you look down at the harness and the ropes and the straps that are keeping you from falling over, you realize just how important quality is. So they designed their equipment, and they insisted on quality because it was saving their lives and the lives of their friends as well. And this quality ethic is something that was maintained with the company. By 1970, they were the leading US supplier of mountain equipment. And in 1972, they faced their great first moral dilemma, which was that climbing was gaining in popularity. And so was the use of pitons, which had to be hammered into the rock face. And what this was doing was damaging the beautiful rock faces of the areas where they love to climb, such as in Yosemite. And so it was causing loss of the natural environment which they so loved. And so they decided to switch to the use of aluminum chocks, which could be fixed into the rock face and pulled out, and it wouldn't damage the rock face. And this was a big change because at the time, pitons were the majority of the revenue of the company, a very small company. So switching to something completely new and at the time not very well known was a big risk. But within 8 months, it became aluminum chocks became the majority of the revenue of the company. And in the early 70s, the clothing line was developed, and it was developed and given the name of Patagonia, and the reason was basically to not dilute the Chouinard Equipment brand itself, and but the quality ethics of Chouinard Equipment were taken over to Patagonia, the clothing company. And since then, despite many mistakes and struggles along the way, the company has now grown to be one that employs 2,000 employees worldwide, and now we're dedicated exclusively to clothing. So I'm having a hard time with the clicker here. So as you'll remember, the mission statement of Patagonia starts off with building the best product. So I'd like to introduce you to what our product is. And we service the following lines: mountain climbing, surfing, skiing or snowboarding, fly fishing, and everyday use. And some of our most iconic products are the Chinchilla Snap Tee, the Houdini jacket, the R1 hoodie, the DOS parka, and the Wavefarer shorts. So now moving on to the element which is cause no unnecessary harm. This is where we begin to talk more about sustainability and more about what impacts my job. The second great moral dilemma that the company faced was in 1988, and it started off by the opening of the Boston store. And employees were very quickly calling in sick with headaches and with stomach aches. And so there was an investigation done, and it was discovered that the formaldehyde off-gassing of the cotton products that was in the basement was what was leading to the sickness in the employees. And this led the company to conduct life cycle assessments of the four main materials which are the backbone of the company: cotton, wool, polyester, and nylon. And it was determined that cotton was actually the material that had the most adverse environmental impacts, but mostly it was at the farming level, and it was due to the pesticide use. And so this led the company to shift all of its cotton products to organic cotton by 1996. And keep in mind that the decision was made in 1994 for 1996. Every single product that contained cotton had to switch to organic cotton. That's a huge change in a very short amount of time. But they stuck to it because they really did believe in it. And this cause no unnecessary harm makes that we still aim to produce multifunctional performance with the lowest possible impact. And what this really means is that we continue to try to use the most environmentally sustainable materials. We also we have our agreement that we will take back products at the end of the use, and we will either repurpose them or recycle them. And we also try to either invest or we try to grow the use of other sustainable materials that are currently not out there. So we help to try to invest in growing them. So now on to the social and environmental sustainability responsibility department, which is where I am. This is an actual worker, not a model. This is a worker in a factory that we source in. And this is a fair trade factory where we source. And we're really proud of this project because it helps to provide funds directly to the workers who will make, we pay a premium on the products, and this goes to a fund which workers can then vote on to spend as they wish. And it's something that we started off small and we've grown very quickly. And I don't have the figures right now, but I know that the expansion of the lines of products is really dramatic. This is our SCR department structure, and I apologize for showing you an org chart because I know it's very boring. But if you're at all familiar with the HIG index created by the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, you'll recognize this structure. These three pillars are product responsibility, brand responsibility, and supply chain responsibility. So our product responsibility pillar looks at using the most sustainable materials, being as efficient as possible, as durable as possible, and also the end of life of the product. The brand responsibility looks at at our headquarters, the energy, water use, recycling, but at our headquarters, at our distribution centers, at our regional offices, and our retail stores. And they really do focus on metrics and on reporting as well. And supply chain responsibility is the area where I work, so we're sort of narrowing it down. And the supply chain responsibility is where we talk about our suppliers. And at Patagonia, we're very lucky because we have visibility into our supply chain, not just at the finished goods factory, but also at the raw materials level, because we nominate our raw materials suppliers. And when we say raw materials, what we really mean is fabric, the fabric level mostly. So supply chain responsibility is where we have our code of conduct, our workplace code of conduct. And this is something that we expect of all of our supply chain partners. And our code of conduct is based on 18 standards, and they're focused around human rights, health and safety, environment, traceability, and animal welfare. And when we go and do audits, first of all, we have our own field staff, which are locals from several different countries where we have most of our sourcing is concentrated. They work long-term with factories. They work with remediation and trying to fix problems. But we also use third-party auditors, and when they go to factories, what they'll do is assess them to the local law or the country law. They'll assess them to our code of conduct and the presence of union agreements or collective bargaining agreements, and also at international labor standards. And the factory will be held to whichever is the highest standard or whichever is the one that protects the rights of the workers the most. And this is something that is another diagram, which is boring again, but this really is very unique because, and I can tell you this from a former consultant's perspective. We have our fourfold vetting approach, which is that any new or potential supplier that comes in has to be approved by 4 different areas: business, quality, social, or environment. And if the supplier fails on any of these 4 pillars, they will not go forward. So that means that social and environment have equal footing with business and quality. And that's something that is taken very seriously, and I know that it's quite unusual, because usually business will win out. And we are members of different affiliations, including the Fair Labor Association, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. We are members of Blue Sign. We are also active in the European Outdoor Group and the Outdoor Industry Association in the United States. So now on to traceability. And I'd like to, here's a beautiful definition of what traceability is. And it's important to sort of preface this by explaining, because a lot of people think it's many different things. It's sort of a new term. And I think it's still in the process of being sort of focused on what it means. But for us, really what it means is we use e-fibers, what we call e-fibers, or environmentally sustainable fibers. And like I mentioned, organic cotton. We also use recycled polyester and recycled nylon and other materials such as Ulex, which is a neoprene that's based off of a plant extract. But we have all of these things, and we believe in them, we really do, and we also talk about them a lot. If you look at our website or you look at our marketing materials and our catalogs, this is very present. But what we need to do, what I need to do, is basically ensure that all of our claims, we have evidence to back these up. And this is sort of a due diligence type of a role. So what my role is to work with the suppliers, and both the finished goods and also the raw materials suppliers, and also my internal colleagues who are sourcing managers or materials experts, and to make sure that we have evidence to back up these claims. And the problem here is that if you look at the picture of the farm, the cotton farm, and you look at the finished product, between those 2 entities, there's probably been at least 6 different big manufacturing processes which are taking place. And in that supply chain, a lot of mixing or swapping, intentionally or not, can actually take place. So by relying on third-party certification, which is what our ideal scenario we do, or otherwise chain of custody, we're trying to ensure that we can provide assurance to our customers first and foremost, because we're telling them a story. We want to make sure that it's something that we are not called out as not having sufficient proof. We also have legal responsibility in the United States under the Truth in Advertising green guides that were created by the FTC. And we also want to ensure that we are getting what we're paying for, because we do pay a premium for our e-fibers, and we want to ensure that we're getting that final product. You can't usually identify or test the if cotton in a t-shirt it came from organic sources or not. I'm not an expert in the materials themselves, so I can't tell you about the others, but I think in general it's pretty much the same case, is that you can't look at a certain material like organic cotton or perhaps recycled polyester and say, yes, it was recycled, or no, it wasn't recycled. So we need to rely on third-party certifications. And the complication here is that our supply chain is big. We have 82 finished goods factories located over 15 countries. We have more than 150 raw materials suppliers located in more than 25 countries. And we don't even really know how many farms we have, but farms are critical. So we're in the process of mapping those by product as needed. And how did we get involved in traceability? And really, it does come down to in some ways, one story, which is the Goose down story. And several years ago, we were attacked by an animal welfare group called Fourfold, because they claimed that our down in our jackets came from geese that were force-fed. And we had, at that time, what we had done so far was to request that our suppliers, our down suppliers, provide us with written affidavits claiming that they did not source the down from geese that were live plucked or force-fed. And we did have long-term relationships with these suppliers, and we felt fairly secure. But due to the campaign, we received over 36,000 angry emails in 1 month. And down is critical for us because it's one of our signature products. So, and also because of what the accusations were, which were force feeding for foie gras. And if you look at the actual images of force feeding, they're horrific. And live plucking, which in terms of an image is actually almost worse. And that's something where a goose will be on a farm for sometimes up to 5 years, and they might be live plucked. Their feathers will be pulled out of them while they're alive. And while it doesn't kill them, it's like having your hair pulled out of your head. And these are horrible, horrible things that are happening to animals, and we, as a company, could not, with due conscience, go ahead with this. So what we did was decide to do an investigation on the ground. We went to where some of the farms were. We started off with slaughterhouses, and frankly, within very little time, we discovered that there was some truth. There actually were evidence of force feeding. And so we decided to go further. So what we did then was develop our animal welfare policy, which basically was saying no force feeding, no live plucking, but also look at the animal husbandry practices and make sure that the animals are not mistreated in another way. And once we developed the policy, we had third-party auditors go and do supply chain assessments of these entities. And what we discovered really was that we had 2 suppliers, and one of them had standards which, in their supply chain, which we could not accept. So we eliminated that supplier, and we had 1, which is really dramatic when you think about how dependent we are on down. After that, since we've moved on, and we have basically gifted our standard to to an organization which has a standard creating body. So now our standard can be used by any down using company who wants to meet these same standards. And what we did too was, as I mentioned, talk to our suppliers. We had to do mapping and outreach. And the mapping that we did, this looks beautiful and very simple, but in fact, as Sally mentioned, supply chains are very complicated, and there's a lot of traders and agents. So once we'd done mapping, which was very complicated, we had to do education, why we were doing this standard, and why we were not going to undercut our suppliers. But we also had to do continuous improvement, communication of our standards. And this we did by our footprint chronicles. And I want to finish with this, which is the results. The same group that attacked us for Pause several years ago came out with an assessment of the brands and what they have done in terms of their efforts to eliminate live plucking and force feeding in the supply chain. And we received the second score out of all of the brands that they assessed. The first one goes to Fjallraven, which we take our hat off to, which they've done amazing work. But for us, we were very pleased because this was the only independently verified auditing that was in the brands that were chosen. So we really felt like this was a big result of our journey. And to finish, if we do have time, and I know that I'm reaching my end, I have reached it, there's a short video that we'd like to show, which perhaps gives a little bit more drama to what this is all about. So thank you very much.